another lecture on property income. In the last class we have started property income, and property income is not a really big topic at all. There is one new concept which we have to discuss today. For example, Mr. A has given his residential property to Mr. B on rent, and the lease term is, let's say, lease term is 20 years. So Mr. A has given his property to Mr. B for 20 years, and Mr. B has given the same property on lease to Mr. C for 15 years. So first one is head lease, and Mr. B has given property to Mr. C, and this is called sublease. Mr. A has given his residential property to Mr. B for 20 years. The lease between Mr. A and B is head lease, and lease between Mr. B and C is sublease. Okay. The premium amount is, in head lease, the premium is 40,000. In sublease, let's say the premium is 32,000. In sublease, Mr. B has received the premium 32, and in head lease, Mr. B has given the premium 40,000. Okay. Requirement is calculate taxable premium for Mr. B. We need to calculate taxable premium for Mr. B. Okay. And let me tell you a very important point. Mr. B is the one who has paid the premium on the same property, as well as Mr. B has received the premium on the same property. Okay. And my examiner is asking us calculate taxable premium for Mr. B. How do we calculate taxable premium for Mr. B? A very simple calculation. First, you need to write the premium which Mr. B has received. So premium which Mr. B has received is 32,000. From this 32,000, you need to deduct a simple relief, and the relief is 2% n minus 1 into the amount of the premium. Less relief, which is 2%. In case of sublease, n is 15 minus 1 into 32,000. Let me use the calculator. Today I have the luxury of calculator. In the last class I did not have calculator. So now alhamdulillah I have a calculator. So the relief amount comes 8960. The relief amount is coming 8960. So first we need to write the premium which Mr. B has received, and then simply deduct the relief. After that, now listen and listen carefully. After that, you have to deduct one more relief. That is relief on head lease. What is the name? Relief on head lease. For calculating this, we have to do the working. So, why actually the question arises, why Mr. B is getting relief on head lease as well? The reason being is, Mr. B has paid the premium on the same property, and he has also received the premium on the same property. Any individual who pays and receives the premium on the same property will get two reliefs. One is a normal relief, and another is a relief on head lease. After deducting relief on head lease, you will get a taxable premium for Mr. B. Taxable premium for Mr. B. So let us calculate working one. How do we calculate relief on head lease? It's very, very simple. Relief on head lease. First you need to write the premium which is involved in head lease. The premium which is in head lease is 40,000. Now you need to deduct a normal relief from this premium also. 2. The time period of head lease is 20 years. 20 minus 1 into 40,000. It is 15,200. It is 15,000. It is actually 15,200. If I deduct 15,200 from 40, I'll get 24,800. Okay. Now, how you are going to get relief on head lease? You have calculated this 24,800. Now come here. Just write that 24,800. Multiply this with the time period of sublease. The time period of sublease is 15. You need to divide this with the time period of head lease. How do we calculate relief on head lease? Let me show you the working again. First, you need to write the premium which is in head lease 40,000. Then simply deduct the relief from that head lease which is 15,200. You got 24,800. And after that, all you need is just write 24,800, and you need to multiply this with the time period of sublease, and you have to divide this with the time period of head lease. So you will get relief on head lease. Let me use a calculator. The amount is 18,600, which means that taxable premium for Mr. B, on which Mr. B has to pay tax, is 4,440. So taxable premium for Mr. B is 4,440. So who gets relief on head lease? The one who has paid the premium on head lease and received the premium on sublease. That individual is going to get two reliefs. One is normal, another is a relief on head lease. Okay. Now let us see a question on this concept. It is a question number 12. Mr. X sublet his property at a premium of 36,000 for 12 years. Mr. X, what he did, he has subletted his property at a premium of 36,000 for 12 years. He has originally acquired this property for 30 years at a premium of 93,000. Required is taxable premium for Mr. X. To be very honest, I would just request you should pause the video over here and attempt question number 12 by yourself, and then obviously you can always take help from the video, but before looking at my answer, I want you to try this question so that you should know yourself where you are standing. But you can always say that I'm not standing, I'm sitting on a chair, or maybe couch, or maybe sitting on a floor, I don't know. But to be very honest, you should try this question. Either you are sitting or where you are standing, I don't know. Question number 12. I strongly believe that you should have tried this question, and after trying this question, you are watching my video. Question 12, let me solve here. We are calculating taxable premium for Mr. X. Let me first write the amount of the premium which Mr. X has received. Mr. X has received 36,000. I'm going to deduct a normal relief, 2%. And Mr. X has given this property only for 12 years into 36,000. Let me use the calculator because I have the luxury of calculator today. I'm very happy for that. Alhamdulillah. The answer is 7920. Now all you need is just deduct relief on head lease. So you will get the answer, taxable premium. So how do we calculate relief on head lease? Relief on head lease. First you need to write the premium which is in head lease. Premium in head lease is 93,000. You need to deduct a normal relief on this head lease, 2%. That is a relief, so that you should not get confused. Less relief, 2%, n minus 1. In head lease the n is 30, minus 1 into 93,000. This is the taxable premium on head lease, 39060. Once you have calculated this 39060, after that it is very simple. Just write 39060 over here, multiply this with the time period of sublease and divide this with the time period of head lease. So you will get relief on head lease, 39060 into 12 divided by 30. It is 15624. 36,000 into 7920 minus 15624. You will get taxable premium of 12456. Okay. So I strongly believe that now you have understood the concept of sublease. And how do we calculate taxable premium for an individual who has actually paid the premium on the same property and received the premium on the same property? So it's very easy. Let me introduce another concept of rent-a-room relief. Rent-a-room relief. Actually in UK there's a concept of paying guest. I exactly don't know, does it still exist or not, because things are not the same now in the world. Paying guest. So it is possible that a family is living and they have given one room on a rent. So they are living in the same property and in one room the guest is also living. We called it paying guest. Okay. If you have given a room on rent, then you will get a rent-a-room relief. And rent-a-room relief is 7,500 per tax year. Let me clear one thing. It is not per room. It is per tax year. If an individual says, I have given 4 rooms on rent, you will not get 4 reliefs. You will get only 1 relief. 7,500 is actually per tax year. Okay. So in case of rent-a-room relief, the amount is 7,500 per tax year, which is fixed. Okay. Now actually, whenever any individual gives a room on rent, that individual gets 2 options. One, whatever rent you are getting from that room, from that rent you can deduct either rent-a-room relief or actual expenses which you have incurred in that room. Actually, you cannot deduct both of them. Let me repeat. If an individual gives a room on rent, okay, he receives obviously a rent from that room. From that rent, either individual can deduct rent-a-room relief of 7,500 or actual expenses. So now the question arises, if we have the option either to deduct rent a room relief or actual expenses. So which option should we select? Answer is very simple, higher one. For example, your rent a room relief is 7,500 and your actual expenses in that room are only 4,000. So obviously I am going to opt rent a room relief, which is 7,500. So in case of rent a room relief and actual expenses, we will opt the option which has a higher value. So for example, the rent from room is, let's say, 10,000, and your examiner says actual expenses in that room are 5,000. Obviously I will not claim actual expenses. I love to claim rent a room relief. So I'll deduct rent a room relief, which is 7,500. So my taxable amount will be only 2,500. Why would I deduct 5,000 actual expenses? So it's a very simple concept. If anyone gives room on a rent, okay, that individual gets two options, either to get a rent a room relief or actual expenses. Logically, whichever is higher, individual is going to opt that option. But there is one more very important concept. What is that? For example, rent from room is, let's say, rent from room is 6,000. I'm just making an example, okay? And your examiner says, second information, that actual expenses are 7,000. Okay. You have rent from room 6,000, but surprisingly expenses in that room, actual expenses are 7,000. Now what to do? Your expenses are more than rent from room, okay? In that case, what should I do? Should I opt actual expenses or should I go for a rent a room relief? Let me solve this in both the ways. For example, I'm writing rent from room, which is 6,000. And let's say I'm going for rent a room relief. Let's see what happens. Rent a room relief is 7,500. Obviously, if you deduct 7,500 from 6,000, you will get a negative answer of 1,500. And that negative answer of 1,500 will represent loss. But let me clear one thing. Reliefs cannot result in a loss. If you come across a situation where a rent from room is less and rent a room relief is higher, you are supposed to write answer 0. You cannot write the answer negative because rent a room relief cannot result in a loss. But look at this. The rent is 6,000, okay? And let's say I'm not going towards rent a room relief. Instead of opting for rent a room relief, I love to opt actual expenses. My actual expenses are 7,000. Now let's see what happens. If I deduct my actual expenses, 7,000. Now definitely you are going to have a loss of 1,000. And when you have a loss, this loss will result in tax saving. The concept is, whenever you come across a situation when your actual expenses in a room, they are more than rent from room, then always deduct actual expenses from rent. Do not opt rent a room relief. Reason I have given you. The reason is very simple. What is the reason? The reason is relief cannot result in a loss. But if you go for actual expenses and your actual expenses are more than the rent, obviously the result is going to be a loss. And from losses you are going to save tax, no doubt about it. Okay. Now what to? Let us try one more question. It is here. If room or rooms are let furnished or an owned house in which person is resident, then rent or room relief is this. And this is per tax year. Let us see question number 13. Mr. N rented a room from his personal residence at a rent of 800 per month. Actual expense relating to property was 30 per month. Room was rented out furnished, taxable, we need taxable property income. So let us solve question number 13. It's a very easy question, I would say, not difficult at all. Question number 13. Let me take the rent. 812, it gives me 9,600. Obviously, I will not deduct expenses because expenses are just 30 per month. If you multiply 30 with 12, you will get 360, which is way too less than rent a room relief. So I am going to deduct rent a room relief, which is 7,500. You will get taxable income. So what is the amount of taxable income? 2,100. Very simple, not difficult at all. Okay, let's go for another concept. So here comes another concept, another rule, real estate investment trust. Let me explain a little bit about what do you mean by real estate investment trust. What is this real estate? It should be real estate with S, not E. What is this real estate investment trust? Actually, every individual cannot buy a property. Am I right? Every individual cannot buy the property because every individual is not so wealthy that they are going to buy the property. So, some of the people, the way back, might have thought on this idea that every individual cannot buy the property. Why not to create a real estate investment trust in which actually trust is going to issue the shares, and obviously shareholders, they are going to buy the shares, and the amount which real estate investment trust is going to raise from the people, that amount will be invested to buy the properties, and then they are going to give those property on rent. So what is the concept behind real estate investment trust is, real estate investment trust is going to issue the shares. Step 1, obviously shareholders, they are going to buy the shares. Step 2, whatever money comes in the real estate investment trust, the trust is going to purchase properties, and trust is going to give properties on rent. Okay. Now, how this trust is going to give return to the shareholders? Very easy. This real estate investment trust is going to give return to the shareholders in the form of dividend. Because real estate investment trust is a company, and company gives dividend to its shareholders. Now listen and listen carefully. Whatever dividend income is coming from real estate investment trust, that income will be treated as non-saving property income. Repeat. Let's say your examiner is saying in the question that Mr. X has received dividend of 10,000 from real estate investment trust. Then you are not supposed to trust on your examiner. It is not a dividend. This dividend will be treated as a property income. And obviously property income is a non-saving income. So dividend from real estate investment trust is treated as dividend income. So you are learning a very new concept today. That sometimes it says dividend income, but it is not a dividend income. Actually, it is a property income. Wow. Question says dividend income. Examiner says dividend income. But you are saying no. It is not a dividend income. It is a property income. Another concept. Whatever you are getting from real estate investment trust, that amount will be net of 20% tax. Question, what do you mean by this net of 20% tax? Basically, the dividend which comes from real estate investment trust and that amount, dividend comes in your bank account, it is actually 80%. 20% tax is already deducted at source. So actually, you will be receiving 80% from real estate investment trust. You will be receiving E is there, I think, real estate investment trust, okay. You will be receiving 80% from that trust. So, if I am receiving 80% and 20% tax I have already paid in advance, what to do with that? Let me tell you. Whatever you are going to receive, it will be 80%, but while solving the question, you have to gross it up. While solving the question, you have to gross it up. Like, if I have received 10,000, for example, how do I gross this 10,000? All you need is multiply this with 100 divided with 80, you will get 12,500. So whatever you have received from real estate investment trust, it will be treated as 80%. While solving the question, you have to gross up. How do we gross up? You need to multiply this with 100 and divide with 80. Now obviously the question comes in your mind that, sir, actually we have received 80%. Why we are working on gross amount? The rule says you have to work on gross amount, and after calculating income tax liability on gross amount, whatever your income tax liability comes, you have to deduct the tax which you have already paid. Actually 20% tax you have already paid. So all you need is just remember a very simple concept. If your question says you are getting a dividend from real estate investment trust, that dividend will be treated as dividend income, number one. Number two, whatever you have received, it is 80%. You have to gross it up by multiplying with 100, and you need to divide with 80. So let us deal with the question so that you will get a really good idea how to deal with real estate investment trust. Question 14. Mr. A has following incomes for the tax year 31st March 2021. Trading income is 23,000. Interest income received is 19,000, and this is real estate investment trust dividend is 12,000. As I mentioned many times earlier, whatever dividend you are getting from real estate investment trust, that dividend income must be treated as property income. And number two, whatever you have got from real estate investment trust, it is 80%. While solving the question, you need to gross it up. How do we gross up? All you need is just multiply real estate investment trust amount with 100 and divide by 80. And so this is not a dividend, this is treated as property income, okay. Finally, dividend income 5,000 is your dividend income. Again, I would request you should pause the video over here and attempt question number 14 by yourself. Then obviously you can always take the help from my answer. And I strongly believe you are watching this lecture after trying question number 14. You need to make a few columns: non-saving, saving income and dividend income. The final column is total. Trading income is a non-saving income. Trading income is 23,000. Interest income received. Interest income is saving income. So real estate investment trust. We have to gross up this 12,000 by multiplying with 100 and dividing this with 80. Let me use the calculator. What I will get, let's see. I'm getting 15,000. And this 15,000 is your property income, and property income falls in non-saving income. We have dividend income of 5,000. Okay, that's it. I'll get the total income. This is 38,000, 19,000 and 5,000. 38 plus 19 plus 5. I need to write 5 here also. It is coming 62,000. Let me deduct personal allowance, obviously from non-saving income. $38,000 minus this, 25,500. This is 19,000. This is 5,000. 62 minus 12,500 gives me 49,500. Okay, now let us try to calculate income tax liability. Let's see what happens. So there is a taxable income of 25,500 in non-saving income. Entire amount falls in basic rate bank. Basic rate bank, non-saving, 25,500 into 20%. It comes 5,100. Okay. I'm done with non-saving income. Now I have to move on saving income. Before applying any tax rate on saving income, I have to check either this individual is a basic rate taxpayer. If this individual is a basic rate taxpayer, then this individual will get nil rate band of 1,000 in saving income. If this individual is a higher rate taxpayer, then this individual will get nil rate band of 500 for saving income. And if this individual is an additional rate taxpayer, then this individual will not get any nil rate band for saving income. Okay. Next point. How do we decide that this individual is a basic rate taxpayer, higher or additional? Let me change the color of my pen to show you how do we decide. Look at this, where the circle is coming. By looking at this amount, you have to decide this individual is a higher basic or a decent rate taxpayer. Looking at 49,500, it is quite obvious, it is quite clear, this individual is a higher rate taxpayer. So whoever is a higher rate taxpayer, that individual gets nil rate band of 500 in case of saving income. So nil rate band saving income is 500. Okay. Now I have to check how much space is left in basic rate band for saving income. Because the limit for the basic rate band is 37,500. I have utilized 25,500 and I have used 500 as well. So how much is left in basic rate band? Let me check. 11,500 is still left in basic rate band. I need to multiply this with 20%. Now we'll move on higher rate band. Higher rate band is saving income. Actually, the amount of the saving income is 19,000, and out of that 19,000, 500 falls in nil rate band, 11,500 falls in basic rate band. So from 19,000, if I deduct 500 and then I deduct 11,500, I still get 7,000. So remaining 7,000 of saving income actually falls in higher rate band, and for saving income, higher rate band tax rate is 40%. When I multiply 40% with 7,000, I get 2,800. So we are done with non-saving income as well as saving income. Now obviously the last income is dividend income. When it comes to dividend income, every individual, irrespective of his or her tax paying status, that individual gets nil rate band of 2,000. So there is a nil rate band dividend income 2,000. Okay, and we have total dividend income of 5,000. Out of 5,000, first 2,000 falls in nil rate band, remaining 3,000 obviously falls in higher rate band. Higher rate band dividend income. In case of dividend income higher rate band, the tax rate is 32.5%. If I take 32.5% of 3,000, I'll get 975. Just add them all. So you will get income tax liability 5,100 plus 2,300 plus 2,800 plus 975. 11175. This is your income tax liability. Your income tax liability is 11175. But this is not your final liability. Why? Actually, from real estate investment trust, we received 12,000. Okay. But while solving the question, what we did? I received 12,000 from real estate investment trust, but while solving the question, instead of working on 12,000, I have worked on 15,000. Now the question is, where is the difference? 3,000. The difference between 12,000, the net amount, and 15,000, the gross amount, is 3,000, and this 3,000 is tax which we have already paid in advance. The tax which we have already paid in advance, it will be deducted from your income tax liability. And we say tax credit less tax credit. 15,000, 20% is 3,000, which gives us tax credit. So your income tax payable comes income tax payable. So your income tax payable is 8175. So how do we calculate tax credit? Let me make a formula for you. Tax credit is gross real estate investment trust amount into 20%. How do we calculate tax credit amount? Just you need to multiply gross real estate investment trust amount with 20%. You will get the amount of tax credit. Why we are deducting tax credit? Basically, tax credit means this is the tax which we have already paid in advance. If I have a total income tax liability of 11,175 and I have already paid 3,000, so I am left with 8,175, which is fair enough. Because the tax which I have already paid in advance, obviously I have to deduct that tax. Okay. Now let us discuss a new concept which is furnished holiday letting. Okay. For furnished holiday letting, you have to memorize all the rules. Because in a recent attempt, I think it was maybe 2020 or maybe 19, there was a question of I think around 5 marks. An examiner was asking only one thing in that question, that all the conditions of, examiner was asking why XYZ property should be treated as furnished holiday letting. In that question, the students were just supposed to write all the conditions and they were just supposed to tell the examiner that these all conditions are met. That is why this property must be treated as furnished holiday letting. So sometimes very simple questions, they come in exam, and sometimes those simple questions become very tough, very difficult if you don't know the rules, if you have not remembered the rules. Obviously anyone sitting in that attempt and having no information of furnished holiday letting rules, obviously that individual would not get any marks. Because when your examiner is asking, tell us the rules, then you have to tell the rules. You cannot make the rules by yourself. Okay. Let's see what is furnished holiday letting. All the following conditions must be met for a letting to qualify for a furnished holiday letting. The one thing is, it is a holiday letting. Holiday letting means that property should be on a tourist spot. Nowadays, obviously, COVID is everywhere, there is no tourist spot. But a very important concept is, it must be a holiday letting. Okay? So, it must be on a tourist spot. I think, according to my little bit information, I think Scotland, which I have heard, is very, very beautiful. If someone is having a property in Scotland and gives that property on rent, so we'll say you are giving a furnished holiday letting on rent. Otherwise, when it comes to Malaysia, you will find many holiday lettings. In Pakistan, especially in Islamabad, you can look at the Google, you can Google it, my information. The second most beautiful capital in the entire world is Islamabad. So, in Islamabad, there are many furnished holiday lettings. Okay. So, one thing is, it must be a holiday letting. Means the property is somewhere on a tourist spot. A. The letting must be furnished accommodation made on a commercial basis. Letting must be furnished accommodation made on commercial basis. In Dubai, obviously, there are many tourist, many holiday lettings. Second, the accommodation must be available for letting to public generally for at least 210 days during the year. So, property should be available for letting as well. Okay? And how many days it must be available for letting? At least 210. Third, the accommodation must be let to public generally for at least 105 days during the year. in part C, at least 105 days the property was given on letting. That is, general public actually have used that property for 105 days. You can say 50% of 210 days. If I take 50% of 210 days, obviously I'll get 105. So this accommodation must be actually let 105 days in the entire year. Okay. D. During their accommodation must not be let to the same person for longer. This is term, not term. Longer term. Longer term means 31 days or more. You are not supposed to give this property on long-term occupations. So long-term occupation means that you have given the same property for one individual for 31 days or maybe more. So normally during the accommodation, during the year, the accommodation must not be let to a same person for long-term. Long-term means 31 days or more. Now the question comes, what if I have given the property on long-term basis? Then if there are long-term occupations, then it must not total more than 155 days in a year. Now there is a confusion. The confusion is that first, sir, you are saying we are not supposed to give property on long-term occupations, which is we are not supposed to give the same property to one individual for consecutive 31 days or more. And then you are saying if there are long-term occupations, then total should not exceed 155. So what is the connection between 155 and 31? Let me clear this. 155 means what? Okay. For example, I have given my furnished holiday letting to Mr. A for 40 days. Obviously it is long-term occupation, yes. I have given the same property to Mr. B for 32 days, that is also long-term occupants. I have given the same property to Mr. C for, let's say, 33 days, that is also long-term occupants. Let's say, in the entire year, I have given this property to 3 individuals on long-term occupants, which is Mr. A, B and C. The total of A, B and C must not exceed 155. If it is not exceeding 155, still your property is a furnished holiday letting. So simply if I add 40 into 32 and 33, obviously it is not exceeding 155. It comes to 105. We are fine with that. But if the aggregate total of long-term occupants exceeds 155, then property will not be furnished holiday letting. Okay. If I have given this property to Mr. D for 20 days. So 20 days is not a long-term occupant. 20 days is not long-term occupations. So while calculating 155 days, the property which I have given to Mr. D, I will not consider it because I have given this property to Mr. D only for 20 days. And 20 days, they do not fall in long-term occupations. In order to be long-term occupations, I must give property to the same individual for consecutive 31 days or more. So I strongly believe now you have understood the whole idea behind 155 days. If you have given same property to different individuals for more than 31 days, then what we are going to do, we'll add up all of the long-term occupants. Then aggregate should not exceed 155 days. So I think now it is clear enough. Okay, now the question arises, if all the 4 conditions are met, 1, 2, 3, 4, then obviously the property is treated as furnished holiday letting. Now the question comes, if a property is a furnished holiday letting, then what benefits individual is going to get? Why do we have so many conditions? So the reason behind having so many conditions are the tax implication for furnished holiday lettings are very different as compared to normal property income. So that is why HMRC they have to make sure that we should not give benefits of furnished holiday letting to an individual for a property which is actually not a furnished holiday letting. So So that is why they have put so many conditions. Only those individuals will enjoy the benefits of furnished holiday letting. Their properties have met the conditions of furnished holiday letting. So now let us see what are the benefits of furnished holiday letting. If a letting is classified as furnished holiday letting, then the following relief will be available. And you need to remember one thing. Whenever HMRC is going to give you relief, they are going to put certain conditions. You will not get any relief without a condition. Yeah, that makes sense. Which HMRC is giving you a relief, so you have to meet certain conditions. So if my property has met A, B, C, D, then I am going to get the relief. Now let's see. Number 1. Losses on furnished holiday letting can only be carried forward. Set up against profit on furnished holiday letting in the future year. The benefit number 1. If you are having a loss in your furnished holiday letting, then this loss will be carried forward, and only from the same furnished holiday letting future profit you can deduct these losses. You are not supposed to deduct these losses from your total income. Second, capital allowances will be available on furniture instead of replacement domestic relief. You will not get any replacement furniture relief in case of furnished holiday letting. You will be getting capital allowances. Third, income will qualify as relevant earning for pension contribution. For pension contribution, this income is treated as relevant income. But for understanding the point number 3, you have to wait for the topic of pension. When inshallah we'll be discussing the topic of pension, then you will come to know what is actually meaning by this, meant by this point number 3, that income will qualify for relevant earning. What do you mean by this? For that you have to wait. Point number 4, capital gain deferral relief, for example, rollover relief, gift relief. So, actually, rollover relief, gift reliefs are only available when an individual gives gift of a business asset to another individual. So, in case of furnished holiday letting, you will get gift relief, you will get rollover relief. So another benefit is when you are selling a furnished holiday letting, or you are giving this furnished holiday letting as a gift to an individual, then you will get gift relief as well. So why do we have 4 conditions A, B, C, D? Because of these 4 benefits. Losses, you will carry forward the losses, and you are going to deduct furnished holiday letting losses from future profit from the same furnished holiday letting. You are going to get capital allowances instead of replacement furniture relief. Income will qualify for relevant earnings for pension purposes, and you can defer the capital gain. Now let us try question number 15. Again, to be very honest, I would request as normal that you should pause the video and attempt this question 15 by yourself. Then always you can take the help from my video. You need to calculate property income. Okay. On 6th April 2020, Fang purchased a freehold house. The property was then let throughout the tax year. Monthly rent is 800. If I multiply this with 12, I'll get 9,600. Okay. During April 2020, Fang furnished the property with a cooker costing 440. When you are initially buying a furniture item, you will not get a replacement furniture relief. Repeat. When you are initially buying a furniture item, you will not get replacement furniture relief. Replacement furniture relief is only available on replacing the furniture. It is not available when you are initially buying the furniture item. So on this cooker 440, you are not getting, this 440 is not qualifying for replacement furniture relief. Okay. A washing machine costing 330, okay, you are not getting any replacement furniture relief. Floor covering 2200. Okay. Because these 440, 330 and 2200 all are initial cost, and initial cost does not qualify for replacement furniture relief. The cooker was sold during the 2020 for 110, is replaced with a similar model costing 460. Now you will get replacement furniture relief on this cooker. Okay, but what will be the amount of the replacement furniture relief? Look at this. You bought the similar cooker for 460. But entire 460 will not qualify for replacement furniture relief because the older cooker you have actually sold for 110. So scrap value of the previously held cooker will be deducted from this 460. If I deduct the scrap value, obviously I'll get 350. So your replacement furniture relief, instead of 460, it is actually 350. Why do I have 350 replacement furniture relief? It makes sense because previous cooker was not scrapped for 0. Previous cooker had a scrap value 110. So actually you are spending 460 and you are receiving 110. So it makes sense that your replacement furniture relief must be 350 rather than 460. Okay. The washing machine was scrapped with nil proceed. So washing machine is scrapped and you did not get even a single penny. Okay. During March 21, it was replaced by a washer dryer costing 670. Let me clear one more thing. Replacement furniture relief is only available when you are replacing the furniture with a similar thing, similar model, not with the advanced model. Although the cost of a similar washing machine would have been 360. So instead of getting the replacement furniture relief of 670, you will get the replacement furniture relief of 360. Because look at the question, what it says. Although the cost of a similar washing machine would have been 360. It means you have bought a washing machine which is having more features. It is not exactly the same which you had previously. So that is why 670 will not qualify for replacement furniture relief. For replacement furniture relief, the amount which you will get is 360 because similar washing machine would have been value at 360, or you would have bought the similar washing machine for 360. So I am not going to get replacement furniture relief 670. Actually, I am going to get replacement furniture relief 360. And since there is no scrap value of the previous machine, so entire 360 is available as replacement furniture relief. Okay. The other expenditure on the property tax of 2021 amounted to 1310, and this is all allowable. Allowable means deductible. So you need to calculate property income. To be very honest, now I'm going to again say pause the video and try to calculate property income for this question. Otherwise, you can always see the video, question 15. Alright. 800 into 12 gives us 9,600. Okay. Let me deduct replacement furniture relief. Replacement furniture relief in case of cooker, 460 minus 110, I'm getting 350. Washing machine, it is 360. We have other allowable expenses 1310. Other allowable expenses 1310. Other allowable expenses 1310. So your property income is 7580. Your property income is 7580. Okay. That is question 15. Look at this question 16. Again, I would just say one thing. You should pause the video over here and attempt this question. by yourself. Okay, let's see. We need to calculate property income 2021. Ronald owns a freehold shop. The shop was purchased on 1st October 2020, and during October 2020, Ronald spent 8,400 replacing the building's roof. Okay. The shop was not usable until this work was carried out. Now listen and listen carefully. And this fact was represented by the reduced purchase price. Question says the shop was not usable unless Ronald has spent 8,400. If your asset is not usable until you carry out some repair work, if it is not usable, then such amount of expenditure is actually a capital expenditure. It is not a revenue expenditure. Because the question says the property, the shop which you have bought, it was not in a usable state. It was not in a usable condition. Actually, it became usable after spending 8,400. So logically, this 8,400 cannot be repairs. So initially, when you are spending an amount to bring the asset into a workable condition, to bring the asset into a usable condition, and then that amount, that is expenditure, is treated as a capital expenditure. And while calculating property income, we do not deduct capital expenditures. While calculating property income, we do not deduct capital expenditure. Okay. On December 2020, the property was let to a tenant with a Ronald received premium 12,000 for a grant of 30-year lease. The monthly rent is 960 payable in advance. And during the period 1st December till 5th April 21, Ronald received 5 rental payments. So 960 into 5. As we know that property income is taxable on cash basis, so he has received 5 rental payments, and all of the 5 rental payments, they fall in the relevant tax year 2021. So I have to work on the 5 rental payments which Ronald has received. Okay. So the rent will be 960 into 5. Due to fire, 8,600 was spent on replacing the roof for the shop during Feb 2021. Only 8,200 of this was paid for the Ronald property insurance. It means your actual expense is only 400. And this 400 is actually repairs. So due to fire, he had to replace the roof. He has spent 8,600, but out of this 8,600, he has received 8,200 from an insurance company. So actually, the revenue expenditure which Ronald has spent is only 400. Ronald paid insurance 480 in respect of the property, and this was paid October 20. So actually, October 20 falls in the tax year 2021. Tax year 2021 starts from 6 April 2020 and it ends at 5th April 2021. Now we know that property income is taxable on cash basis. If you have paid the insurance within the relevant tax year, then the entire insurance amount will be deducted. No matter you have paid that insurance for 2 years, 3 years or 10 years. If you have paid the insurance for the property within the relevant tax year for which we are solving the question, then entire insurance payment will be deducted while calculating the property income. So this information is irrelevant for us, that the insurance paid on October 2020 will last for 30th September 2021 is irrelevant for us. Why? Because property income is calculated on cash basis for individuals. So now let us try question number 16, and that is the last question of property income. Actually, after property income, we will be inshallah discussing pension. After the topic of pension, your employment income will start. Rent, It was 960 into 5. 960 into 5, that is 4,800. Premium is 12,000. Less relief 2%, and the lease term is 30 years. Mm-hmm. 6960. It is 6960. I hope it is. Let me read again. It is 6960. Then we need to deduct repairs. 8,600 minus 8,200 gives us 400. Insurance paid. Insurance paid, which is 480. So I have taken the rent for 5 months. The question says he has received 5 rental payments. Premium is 12,000 for 30 years, so I've deducted the relief as well. The relief is 2% and minus 1 into the amount of the premium. The answer is 6960. Repairs 400. Why? He has spent 8,600, but 8,200 he has received from the insurance company. Insurance paid within a relevant tax year is 480. So here comes property income. Property income of Ronald. Let me use a calculator. 4,800 plus 12,000 minus 6960 minus 400 minus 480. It gives me the result 8960. That's it. Alhamdulillah, the job is done. So we are done with the property income, a very small topic. In next class, I'll be discussing inshallah pension income, NIC, and I'll try to discuss a little bit on trust as well, and there's one more concept. So we'll be discussing more on pensions, inshallah. After completing the topic of pension, we will move on property income, or we will move on employment income. But now, inshallah, from here onwards, you will be regularly getting videos. Don't worry. So I would just say thank you very much for watching this video. Have a nice day, nice night, nice evening, and the whole day nice. Thanks a lot. Assalamu alaikum.